in Baltimore, and little strings in my mouth for biting my tongue open on Friday. And one of the guys who immediately came to the rescue and said, "Hey, if you put me on, I'll do all the talking. You won't have to talk too much." And I'm thinking, that's great. I'm going to get Eric Edholm on here. And in the meantime, Eric, when I booked you on, there was no Jeremy Maclin. And now on the backside of this, we have so much more to discuss. He is the NFL writer at Yahoo Sports and the Shutdown Corner blog out on the web. You can follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. That's EDHOLM. Out of the second city where the Orioles are going to try to not embarrass themselves against the White Sox this week, we welcome him back onto the program. Jeremy Maclin, we're all fixed now. We're 12 wins, right, for the Ravens?
Oh, lock it in, right? I'm sure he can play, tackle if you need to as well. Yeah, and I mean, look, this is, to me, this is classic Ozzie Newsome. He smelled an opportunity that usually doesn't exist in June. A frontline player. He may not be a true number one receiver, by, according to Hoyle, whatever. But Jeremy Maclin is a good player, and he can be a de facto number one in this offense. And the fact remains that they didn't draft a receiver for the first time in forever. They didn't get a Brandon Marshall or, a Pierre Garçon, guys they looked at. So, with the Pitta news, with everything else, I feel like they had to come away with somebody. So whether it was Eric Decker, whether it was Maclin, they got it done with Jeremy Maclin. Marty Morningweg's happy. He's had him before. So this is a rare pickup for this time of year for a team like that.
Well, and especially a team in need, right? I mean, after the draft, all we talked about around here in Baltimore is we didn't get Flacco any weapons. We didn't help the offense. Dixon's suspended. The O-line is suspect to begin with. Who's going to play right tackle? Who's going to play center? Who's going to catch the ball? I had said for several months that it felt to me like Ozzie Newsome and John Harbaugh were really betting their careers in this year. They haven't made the playoffs in 3 out of 4 years on Brashad Perryman. And Perryman's looked good running around. And we've got minicamp this week. We'll see more from him, and hopefully he stays upright. But this really does change, I think, the complexion of what Mike Tomlin's defense is going to have to do twice in Pittsburgh, what Marvin Lewis is going to have to do in Cincinnati. This certainly upgrades things. I like Iz's a whole lot better than I like Mike B's.
Yeah, right. I agree. And I think that they just felt like, this is the kind of move that they have to have, especially with Joe Flacco kind of entering that critical period of his career. His contract gets mentioned all the time. And if you're, like you said, all the obstacles they're facing right now, Dixon suspended, Pitta out, not a part of the, not going to be with the team this year. Other tight end injuries, other questions at receiver. As good as Perryman might look, I mean, we're still talking about a guy who's averaging about 2 catches a game. So, if he can provide that deep threat, terrific. That's great. Mike Wallace will obviously help too. Maclin, though, provides that kind of intermediate option, and he was very good at it. Now, last year, he was hurt, but before getting injured, I mean, he still was a frontline player. I just don't think the Chiefs viewed him as a $10 million player, and that's why they cut him. So if he's, look, he can still play like your typical $7 or $8 million receiver and be effective in this offense. So this is a good move. He knows Marty's offense. He'll fit right in. He's a Ravens-type player, and they've had success bringing in those veteran receivers in the past.
Eric, where are you on the Joe Flacco point in his career and coming back from the injury and this offense and the pieces around him? If you believe in the Ravens, I think you believe in Joe Flacco. I do, but my eyes want to see more around him than what I've seen the last couple of years.
Right. I mean, we're talking about a guy heading into his age 33 season, and obviously the numbers have fallen off a little bit. We've seen the interception totals drift a tiny bit up the last few years. You mentioned 3 out of 4 years. I mean, those are, he'd been very good early in his career keeping those numbers down. They've floated up a little bit. The touchdowns and the yards per catch and the completion percentages have been, I guess, he's completed a good percentage of his passes, but they haven't done a lot with him. And even last year, the high yardage total, a lot of that didn't amount to a great offense. So, I think you look at the big picture and you still say he's been a pretty reliable guy. The one injury 2 years ago, notwithstanding, not his fault. I still think he could be a productive quarterback, and I still think he can be better. Kind of like Eli Manning in that sense of right when you start writing him off, that's when he can have a good season. I think he's got that quality about him to kind of turn the page and be so businesslike about it. So, there's familiarity in the offense. They've upgraded now. I can see him having a good year, but that division, you mentioned 2 out of the 3 teams they face, it's tough. And I don't think the Browns are going to be a joke defensively like they were last year. I think they'll at least be competitive in some aspects. So it's tough sledding for a team coming off an 8-8 season.
Boy, everybody thinks the Browns are somehow going to make a step. I'm not a believer forever. I mean, I saw the Cubs win a championship, for crying out loud, right? I mean, anything's possible, right? But I find it very, very hard to believe that we're going to see the Browns make major moves given the quarterbacks they have right now as far as wins and losses. Maybe the defense will be more representative. To some degree, I don't know how they could be a whole lot worse than they've been the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, we're not talking about this could be the kind of team where by the end of this coming season we say, you know what, they're a team on the come. They're a team that even in a 5-11 season or whatever, 4-12, whatever they may end up being, you're going to see, I think, signs of improvement. I think there will be some big holes defensively at times. They'll blow some plays. They'll go all-out blitz and give up a 70-yard touchdown. It's just not all there yet. But I think they're starting to put some stuff together, had a nice draft, added some pieces through free agency. There's signs of optimism, but we've also been singing this song for a long time with the Browns, and it really hasn't come true. So like you, I need to kind of see it before I fully believe it.
He is Eric_Edholm out on Twitter and at the NFL's Yahoo Sports site, Shutdown Corner blog as well. And you can follow him out on Twitter, and tens of thousands do, out of the fighting city of Chicago, where the Orioles will be playing on the south side. Are you Cubs or are you White Sox out there, Eric? What's you?
Well, I grew up in Boston, so I've always been a Red Sox fan. I hope that doesn't turn off too many people around there. But,
I'm married to one of them. I know how that goes. I married into the family.
No, I mean, I lived in Wrigleyville, so I've been to more Cubs games, but I don't mind the White Sox. I can dig them. They're all right.
All right. Well, the Cubs did plenty of winning last year, and I know this year there's plenty of whining, right?
That's how it is, man. And I knew it was going to be something like this. I knew Cubs fans are going to be, if the team was sitting at 500 around this point, go, what's wrong with this team? Look, plenty of baseball left, a lot of talent on the team. I'm sure they're going to be okay in the long run, but it is a little surprising they haven't been a little better than they were last year.
All right, back onto the football side here. All these teams with mini camps, and let's look at the Ravens as an example. 2 weeks ago, they thought Dennis Pitta was going to be their tight end. 2 weeks ago, they thought Tavon Young was going to be their nickel corner. 2 weeks ago, they thought Jeremy Maclin was going to be catching passes in Kansas City, right? And it really is, I guess it speaks to the league at this point. You said Ozzie Newsome with this incredible Ozzie June signing, but it's never kind of over, is it? I mean, for Eric Decker, there will be another, August, there'll be camp casualties. There's going to be Colin Kaepernick banging around for the quarterback position for the first quarterback that goes down. Someone's going to get hurt this week. Someone's going to get hurt next week. Someone's going to get arrested at some point. I mean, all that stuff's going to be happening here during the summer. As much as they'd like to put everybody in a rubber room and, put them in a bow tie and break them out on Labor Day to go play football, that's kind of not the way it works. And, boy, the Ravens have been hit harder than anyone over the last couple of weeks with that.
Oh, you're right. No, I mean, obviously, you pray that in these non-contact type, operations in the summer, it's supposed to just be sort of running around and, maybe shorts and shells at some points. But, yeah, I mean, you don't expect, the Lions to lose their left tackle for 4 to 6 months. You don't expect Tavon Young to tear his ACL. You don't think, Pitta, obviously, the history was there. We knew that it was just the timing of it because he had just gotten done talking a few days earlier about, hey, I'm not thinking about the injury. I'm coming off this great year, blah, blah, blah. That's what made that so brutal. Like you said, they expected him to be able to contribute this year, so there still was a shock value to it. And you're right. I can spend the months of June and July doing all these, spreadsheets and figuring out who has the toughest schedule and who lost the most to injury and who had the most, one-score victories last year and all these crazy statistics to try to figure out who's going to be good this year. But then 1 or 2 injuries can just throw everything out of whack, and it's just that's what makes the NFL so fun. Not that I don't like the NBA or baseball or whatever, but you kind of feel like you have a lock on about 80% of those leagues where you sort of know who the contenders are, who the bad teams are. In the NFL, I mean, it really is true. Whether it's a team like the Ravens going from 8-8 to 12-4 or to 4-12, it happens every single year with multiple teams. So it makes our jobs tougher, but it also makes it more interesting, too.
Well, who are you all hot and bothered about here in the offseason? I mean, I hear so much about Tampa and improvement, so much about Tennessee and improvement. I guess that ties back to the quarterbacks, even up in Philadelphia after what Carson Wentz showed last year. The optimism really is around, do we have a young quarterback that's ready to make that next step that maybe Derek Carr made last year before his injury, or maybe even a place you don't see it like in Dallas where Dak Prescott came in and sort of saved the day for them last year?
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's probably going to be one of those unexpected things. Maybe Tyrod Taylor bounces back with a new coach and, a little bit, maybe a little bit more of a stable situation. But you mentioned Philly and Wentz, and I think they're a team that maybe people are sleeping on a little. They were really good defensively last year overall. They had the one sort of terrible game against the Steelers. They had a couple of blips on the radar. Offensively, not very good, but the special teams and defense were really good. And if Wentz makes any improvement at all with the better receivers, with maybe a little bit more consistent run game, having their starting O-line intact, not losing Lane Johnson for two-thirds of the season, they might be a team that surprises people. I wouldn't be shocked. Their numbers suggested they should have been far better than 7-9 a year ago. So maybe some of that's coaching. Maybe they'll get some breaks this year. I don't know. That's one team that I'm watching. But you're right. I think the story heading into the year are like the veteran running backs or just the run game in general. It could be a resurgence for guys like Marshawn Lynch and, some of the old guys, Adrian Peterson, if he shows anything in New Orleans. And then the young quarterbacks. Do the Winston, Mariota, Wentz, do those guys kind of take the next step and propel maybe a mediocre team or a good team into that upper echelon?
Eric Edholm joining us here from Yahoo Sports. You can follow him out on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. That's EDHOLM. He also read a great long-form article about a year ago on the 96 Ravens. And, of course, we lost Michael Jackson a couple of weeks ago. And I know I threw you his number, and he talked to you about that. He's quoted there. Then you wrote the incredible April piece on Joel Bushbaum, or Bucksbaum, as he would always say, and Mel Kiper and the evolution of the draft. You're working on left-handed quarterbacks, and I love your work because you write the sort of long form thing that I prefer to write. I'm writing about Peter Angelos this summer and the Peter Principle, so I'm releasing all that this summer. So I do have a Book Jones in me, but the left-handed quarterback story, they're gone, right? I mean, they're like dinosaurs, not roaming the earth anymore.
Right, and there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, we have 119 quarterbacks currently on rosters and one lefty. And, if you figure lefties make up about, 10, 12% of society, that number's way out of whack. And so I asked a bunch of people, and there's a lot of reasons why. Some of them are, Tim Tebow's out of the league now, and that whole generation of Boomer Esiason and Steve Young and Mark Brunell and those guys, there was always at least one starter or one dominant lefty in the league at all times. Now we just have one total, and he's a backup, Kellen Moore for the Cowboys. So a lot of them became pitchers. A lot of teams don't like adjusting to left-handed quarterbacks. So I found some really interesting stuff when I talked to coaches, players, general managers, a lot of people from the college level as well. Some guys will go to camps where there are 50 quarterbacks, the high school kids coming up, and there'll be one or two lefties. And it just seems like a lot of them are being driven to other positions or other sports. So, that we'll see another one, starting at some point in the next few years. But the last left-handed TD pass, Dez Bryant. So it's been a while since we've seen an actual quarterback throw a left-handed pass in the NFL.
Wow, that's really a telling statement now, isn't it?
How about that? I mean, it was a trick play. It was the end of the year. Kellen Moore got hurt. We didn't have a left-handed quarterback start a game last year. We're probably not going to have one happen this year if Dak Prescott doesn't get hurt. So we could go 2 straight seasons without a lefty QB starting a single game, which is just it's a little quirky to me.
If you and I, and we're pretty educated NFL guys, you and I, if I started playing the game and I said Jim Zorn and you said Ken Stabler and, I said Chris Sims and you said Todd Marijuanovic, I don't know, we wouldn't be at this game long, would we? I mean, literally, if we were just talking about left-handed quarterbacks in the history since we collected football cards 50 years ago, we'd be out of breath a minute or a minute and a half into this, wouldn't we?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, we could come up with some good ones, and then you've got I think there was one lefty playoff game ever. I think it was Chris Sims it's the one playoff game he ever started against Mark Brunell for the Redskins. We've had some quirky little left-handed moments in NFL history like that. Stabler's going into the Hall of Fame. Steve Young is obviously great. We can come up with some names, but, man, you have to go back a little bit. Like you said, those are all guys from a generation or two or three ago because, other than, the recent ones like Tebow, there just aren't that many who've played in the last couple seasons.
Well, and everything about it's weird. The receiver catching the football is weird, right?
Yeah, exactly. The ball spins differently. I was talking to Brock Heward. He used to play for the Seahawks and the Colts, and he was up in Washington now. And
see, you would win the battle because you've been talking to the Brock Hewards of the world. How am I going to compete with that?
You got every lefty QB I can find.
Scott Mitchell. Did you talk to Scott Mitchell?
Not yet.
All right. You got to find him. We got to find
Scott.
He's on my list. All right.
But, yeah, the ball spins different. The receivers aren't used to it. It drifts, toward or away from the sideline. I mean, it's funny to hear guys talk about little specific things like that, but it does play into to who gets the ball.
You want to pick on the Redskins a little bit? I just want to do that because U2's playing their stadium this week instead of ours. So I want to take a cheap shot at the Redskins while I can. Anything you want to do?
Hey, they lose Deshaun Jackson. They lost some other guys this offseason. I'll help you out in any way I can. I mean, obviously, when they're, when I used to have to go to, shows that didn't come through Boston, and I had to go to New York, like Madison Square Garden or Yankee Stadium or whatever. That always hurt me a little bit. You had to go to enemy territory to see the band you want to see play. That's a little rough.
Well, right. I mean, there's a lot of bands that have never played in Baltimore. U2's not one of them. They played our stadium, and they've played our arena, so that's okay. I'll give them a pass. But I just want to kick the Redskins while they're down. I want to see them win like 2 or 3 this year.
I mean, they're one of those teams, I'll tell you what, they were pretty darn good last year. Basically a playoff team. They lost in Week 17. It came down to the last drive, essentially. So, but, I don't know what to make of them. I really don't. They lose a little bit of their offensive firepower now. Are they going to be as consistent? I think they're as good. Samaje Perine, their rookie running back, could be really good, but we haven't seen them play yet. So they're a tough one for me to figure out. I feel like they're on the verge. They could be there, but then this whole Cousins thing, and they're a weird team, man. It's a tough division too.
And they have such a lovable owner as well. It's kind of like my Peter Principle series.
He endears to our hearts, man. He pulls at our sensitive side.
I feel the warmth of that vanilla ice cream melting all over the desk of Mike Nolan every time I think of him. So, hey, Eric, always great to check in with you, man. Thanks for carrying us through. We'll be following you out at Yahoo, and have a good summer out there. Go see some baseball and enjoy your life out there in the Second City.
We will do. Hopefully catch up with you real soon, man. Sounds good.
Hope so. Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports joining us here. He is the author of the Shutdown Corner blog. You can find him out at Yahoo as well as at Eric_Edholm. That's EDHOLM. And if you've never read his 1996 Baltimore Ravens piece, just Google it. It pops up. It's lengthy. It's wonderful. And it sort of brings back my youthful enthusiasm. By the way, the Cleveland Browns had a 1995 reunion over the weekend. I caught that on Phil Savage's Twitter at Senior Bowl Phil. So there you have it. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. Nasty at WNST.net always finds me. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.